The Toronto Raptors confuse me in their team building, and going into this offseason, I feel that they need to really pick a direction, neither stripping it all down and going towards the bottom, or keeping this roster construction that they truly do have and trying to figure out what its best capabilities are in either swinging a big time trade or potentially even keeping this roster to trying to see what it can bring out to its totality. And I think going into this offseason, we're going to see a lot similar with the Toronto Raptors, but I would like to see a little bit of change. So we're going to dive in and we're going to be breaking down the Toronto Raptors in this episode here on the NBA offseason breakdowns, where we are diving into every single team here on Swish City and looking at their offseason and which moves that I think they should be making either in the draft, free agency, or in via trade to really possibly bring out the best in either succeeding or going towards the bottom in their respective conference. If you guys are tuning in as Raptors fans, I want to know your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. So let me know what I said down below, if I was leaning right to what the Raptors fans should do or if I am completely wrong. And if you missed the other videos in this series and you are interested, definitely go check them out because there's already a bunch of them already out there on some numerous teams below the Raptors in the standings already. So without further ado, let's dive into it and let's discuss some teams. So like I broke down in the introduction, we're going to be discussing the Toronto Raptors. And last season, they finished 11th in the Eastern Conference, 30-52, and a respective place where I thought they were going to finish in an Eastern Conference with some teams a little bit more stacked than the Raptors are, really trying to figure out their identity with their new wing combo and extending Emmanuel quickly. It was going to be a little bit of a developmental season, I thought, for the Raptors, and that's what we seemingly saw took place, with them also dealing with some injuries as well. And even though they did deal with all of this, it was a fun, exciting season for the fans, right? Even though they did get 11th place, 30-52, didn't make the playoffs, they did have some bright things happen and did make a splashy trade before the season did finish, as in the offseason, they went, or not in the offseason, but middle of the season, they went and acquired Brandon Ingram for the New Orleans Pelicans and only had to give up expiring contracts in Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk. Pretty solid deal, if you would say so myself. They did extend Brandon Ingram to this long-term deal, and now we're back with their three-wing lineup, something that we did see similar with this squad just last season with Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby being on the squad alongside Scottie Barnes. Now the two wings are RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram, but a little bit more rounded out with Jakob Poeltl and Emmanuel quickly. Now the Raptors, when looking at their salary cap sheet at $196 million, are right above the first apron at this moment, but are shy of that second apron. So do have some restrictions, but still have the taxpayer mid-level exception to offer out in free agency. Now, it does say that they were projected to get the 7th overall pick here, but as we all do know, the Raptors did fall in the draft, as everyone basically did, getting jumped by the Spurs and Mavericks, in which they were ultimately falling into pick 9 here. Now, pick 9 is an interesting spot for the Raptors, in my opinion. I feel like they did deserve a little bit of a higher pick here, as they were, I think, scheduled, like I mentioned, to get 7, but getting 9 is a little bit of a tough spot for a team in the midst of, being in the middle of an Eastern Conference and once again, a weaker Eastern Conference, right? And if you look at teams below them, right, the Wizards at least have some young guys that they can really develop. The Hornets have some stars that they can really kind of count on in a little bit of a similar situation to the Raptors. The Bulls kind of stuck in the middle of nowhere land. The Nets probably going to be going towards the bottom this season and picking that direction. And the Sixers were looking to be getting back into that playoff conversation. The Raptors, seemingly kind of like the Bulls, are kind of stuck in this middle ground here. And with a Eastern Conference with, 6 pretty quality teams out there that are going to make the playoffs next season, with the possibility of the Sixers, possibility of the Bucks with Giannis still staying, the possibility of Orlando, Miami, and Chicago and Atlanta still competing. It seems like the Raptors are once again in this middle ground here, and I think with this 3-wing roster, it doesn't really make the most sense to continue to kind of keep this team building, but also keep this roster how it is constructed. So I do think the Raptors will explore some moves this season, and that's what we're going to discuss here. So the first move I think that they're going to initially discuss is revolving around RJ Barrett, as even though RJ Barrett was a young flashy wing coming to his hometown team in Toronto, it doesn't necessarily meant that he was a long-term stay for the foundation of this team. And I think with trading for Brandon Ingram and giving him that extension, it clearly signifies you're going to be sticking with Brandon Ingram and you believe in him to take over this wing duties. Now, you could obviously let Scottie Barnes play some point guard and play that role as he has in the past, but ultimately I do think he fits best in that at the 4, and I still do believe that Toronto feels that he can be that number 1 option for them, even though I think at best he's going to be a number 2. Therefore, I do think RJ Barrett, with his tradable contract and his productive play last season with his best season overall with this team dealing with so many injuries, I feel like he's at his best value. And I feel like with the Raptors here, they have been mentioned in the Giannis Antetokounmpo sweepstakes. He would obviously have to be a tradable contract in that to get it done. And I think the Raptors would easily do that deal to get a guy like Giannis and pair him up with guys like Brandon Ingram and potentially even Scottie Barnes if they were able to keep him in that trade. Now, if not, and even if they don't get a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, I still think dangling a guy like RJ Barrett out there on the open market is a good experiment for the Toronto Raptors to kind of gauge what his value is, but not only that, see if you can really identify that true center or that true point guard, because truly I do believe Immanuel Quickley can be a top tier scoring guard, but I don't necessarily know he's that 1A type point guard that you're necessarily going to want to have on this Toronto Raptors team, specifically when you look across the NBA with seeing how great some of these guards are and somehow some bench guards play, guys like Payne Pritchard and stuff. I feel like a guy like Immanuel Quickley is on a little bit of a stepper down value, so maybe you look to move a guy like RJ Barrett to get that upgrade at the point guard position. And another guy as well I want to mention, but very briefly, is Jakob Poeltl. I don't think Jakob Poeltl is going to be traded, and I want to preface that before I dive into all of this. But with my draft selection for the Toronto Raptors and with their surplus of bigs already on this team at the young cheap market, I think a guy like Jakob Poeltl at his, I think, $18 or $19 million is one of the most tradable contracts that the Raptors have and one of the best contracts for a center across the NBA. And we know teams like the Los Angeles Lakers are interested amongst others for a center this offseason. So if you are willing to take a rookie center or able to land one of them at pick 9, I think a move involving Poeltl could be done either to get that Giannis deal done also, or to potentially be used in another package to once again bring in that point guard or any necessary depth that you feel you are missing because you are drafting a rookie center to basically replace Jakob Poeltl. I don't think Jakob Poeltl is going to be traded, but if the cards do fall how I think they are going to fall for the Raptors, I think post-draft he's a potential name to look out for on the trade market. So now let's dive into the draft here, and let's look at what the Raptors could potentially get with their 9th overall pick. Once again, they do have the 39th pick, but we're just going to be looking at their first round selection here. And for the Raptors, I think there are multiple options. Like I mentioned, I think the center is a position to look at, and one of those guys being named is Kaman Malawak, who I've mentioned multiple times over these last couple of videos, but I think he kind of fits the build of what Masai Ujiri would like in a center. Once again, athletic, rim protector, can finish around the rim, and I think he would be a perfect fit alongside RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes, Brandon Ingram in those pick and rolls, being able to do that similar to Jakob Poeltl. Once again, is a cheaper contract and on a rookie deal where you're going to want him to really take over at that starting position. That's why I think if you're the Toronto Raptors and the pick like Malawak does fall to you at 9, I don't know if he necessarily will, but if he does fall to you at 9, that is something that I ultimately would consider because Malawak I think is one of the top tier fits for this Raptors team. Another guy that also plays the big man position is Derek Queen, and he's been mocked to go alongside right around where the Raptors are around to pick, and I think he would also be an interesting target once again for this Raptors team here. Plays that power forward / center, so once again you could still keep Jakob Poeltl, potentially move Scottie Barnes and Brandon Ingram to that 2-3 position and look to move a guy in RJ Barrett if you do draft a guy in Derek Queen, but I think he would be another solid fit on this squad. And then looking at the point guard position here, diving in at Kaspers Jakunis, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but goes to Illinois, a point guard, kind of the fit that I think they would need. Shot creator, playmaker, can kind of create his own shot, and could be a little bit of a different look than they have at that guard position in scorers and all-out scorers and shooters, and guys in Immanuel Quickley and a guy in Grady Dick. I think Kaspers kind of brings a different, unique type of point guard that this team desperately lacks and could be available for them at pick 10 if guys like Malawak do fall, or even if they don't feel that confident in a guy in Derek Queen. And the last pick that I think the Raptors could pick, because He's kind of climbing up. And once again, this kind of screams Raptors. A French wing, once again. His name is Noah Asengi. Once again, I'm not greatest with these names pronunciations. And once the draft gets closer and closer, we kind of get some more confirmation. I'll be a little bit better on all of this. But Noah is a French wing, has that big, lengthy size. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of like a Toumani Camara type here from his build. And once again, the Raptors love their wings. They've traded for Brandon Ingram. They have Scotty Barnes. They have RJ Barrett. Once again, maybe they draft a wing to maybe replace one of those guys if they look to use them on the trade market, or maybe they just want to run an all-wing team here in Toronto. We saw last year they drafted Jamal Shed, they drafted Jacoby Walter, and they drafted Jonathan Mogbo. Jacoby Walter being one of those guys who is, again, another wing off the bench. This Raptors team really, really loves their wings, and who knows? Maybe they feel confident in building that all-wing team like I just stated. Maybe Masai Ujiri wants that size, wants that length, and they feel confident in a guy in Noah to really transcend into that. When looking at free agency as well for this Raptors team, before we do sign off, they are bringing back a lot of their guys on this team already, so they only have one or two roster spots, kind of being close to the first apron. I don't see them giving out much, and with adding a first-round pick, we'll have to wait and see. If they were to make a move for Giannis, obviously, they would be freeing up a little bit more salary and sending out some contracts out and future draft capital to, retool this roster to make it a little bit more of a contender. So in that case, obviously, expect some more veteran minimum type of guys to be going to the Raptors. But if that's not the case, I could see a guy like Chris Boucher, who is listed as a free agent for this Raptors team, resigning, as he's a solid power forward for them, could come off the bench and really doesn't take any of these needs away from maybe a guy like Derek Queen a little bit. But that's basically it for this Raptors squad. Besides that, maybe a backup point guard, a guy like Dennis Schroeder or Trey Jones, if they feel confident, like they want to go out and get a guy like that, or have the money to do so if that player does want to come to Toronto. But if not, once again, maybe looking at a guy like Kaspers in the draft is the key for Toronto at that point guard. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Once again, if I did talk about the Raptors right or wrong. Once again, their team building kind of really does confuse me. I don't really know what direction they're going in. They're kind of in the middle of the pack of a weak Eastern Conference. And it's going to be exciting to see what really happens or changes with Toronto. Could they get back to that limelight of a couple seasons ago where they were in those Eastern Conference finals? Are they still going to be in this middle of the pack towards the bottom once again? It may have to reevaluate their direction going into next season. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll catch you guys in the next one on this series. So if you do enjoy it, make sure to hit the like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out. Have a great rest of your day.